All right, joining me for this episode is friend of the channel, TJ Cooney. TJ and I are kind of related in that his uncle was an academy classmate of mine, and we went through flight school together and also the F-14 RAG. And then your uncle TJ was in Brand X when I was what we call a Cat 2 in VF-143. He was in VF-142. Unfortunately, we lost TJ in 2008 uh, due to a medical error in post-op. So I saw your aunt last fall at my class 40th reunion here in Annapolis, and I miss TJ on a daily basis. He was a fantastic human being. So anyway, we actually met each other in person a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year. You were working on a film project about Carrie Lorenz, the female Tomcat pilot, and I did some testimonials. So that's where we connected. You run a YouTube channel called I Need More Space, and you do deep dives on all manner of this, let's call it renaissance in space exploration. I've asked you to come on as a function of the SpaceX launch yesterday. So let's start by running the launch, and I'll have you narrate what we're seeing, and then we'll do some analysis on the backside of that. So let me bring up the launch.
Sounds good.
All right, T minus 4, 3.
So at this point, the Raptors ignite, and we're not actually sure it's going to fly yet because they may just burn them and then kill them for a test. But the hold down clamps on the on stage 0, as Elon calls it, release, and Starship flies for the first time. And if you look at the bottom there, obviously lots of smoke and debris flying everywhere, which we'll get into in a minute. Immediately, we'll see 3 Raptor engines on that bottom left graphic have already been shut down. That's all done by the flight computer. It's analyzing how those engines are performing, and if they're underperforming or even overperforming or just out of norm, they will shut them down. You'll see, although during the descent here, a variety of different flashes coming from the back end there of Starship. At one point, and I think what we're seeing it now to the left of the core engine plume there is like this streak of light. There it is. That we are thinking is one of the hydraulic systems for the thrust vector control being no more. As the ascent continues, Raptors are continuing to shut down. And as anybody who knows, flying high performance vehicles, thrust vector control is really a core component of controlling these vehicles and rockets. We've been using TVC for 60, 70 years. And here's
So let me pause it. Let me pause it there, TJ. So just on the bottom here, we have this circle of lights. That's the engines, as you said. Ones that are underperforming are not illuminated. And then just draw everybody's attention to speed in kilometers per hour, downrange travel in kilometers. And then there's this graph where the rocket is oriented relative to, I guess, the horizontal line is the horizon.
Yes.
Is that right? And then you have T is the time of flight. So let me get it going again.
Yep. So the outer ring of engines, they don't have thrust vector control. They're locked. They're only flying one direction. The inner 2 rings, they have TVC control, and they actually point the rocket in different directions. Unfortunately for this rocket, the one side of the Raptors is failing more often than the opposite side. So the center of thrust is starting to not align with the center of mass. So the rocket is going to want to start turning. And so the thrust vector control engines are going to try to counteract that. Right now, we're still early in the flight, so they're trying to get vertical as much as they can to the thinner parts of the atmosphere. It's continuing ascent, and all things considered, going well. Even with these Raptors failing, Starship is proving to be, it can fly.
So it looks like, to me, it looks like it's in deep stall right here, right? This doesn't look like a space shuttle launch. Point.
So typically at this point, we start seeing it starting to tip over more horizontally. This is a shot of the interstage between Starship and the Super Heavy. So that top there is the second stage, essentially. We'd expect it to see it going more horizontal, and now we're seeing that the rocket has lost control, unfortunately, at this point. That off-center thrust was just too much for the gimbaling engines to compensate for. At this point, we were expecting to see the second stage separate. There's we don't have an official statement from SpaceX yet as to why it didn't, but these engines should be shut down at this point, and they are still running. So there may have been some control issues there. But also could have been a part of the abort procedure where if the rocket was spinning out of control, to not separate it so that you don't have two massive dangerous things falling to Earth. You have just one large thing falling to Earth. And then in a few moments here, we'll see they initiated the flight termination system, which is essentially an onboard bomb, so that it will break up into smaller chunks before it hits the surface.
Yeah, so it does two. I mean, if this was an Su-57, this would be like really cool vectored thrust,
Yeah.
nose positioning, right? But it does basically 2.5, 3, let's just call it loops,
Yep.
tight loops here. And as you said, they initiate the let's call it self-destruct. The wording that they use is pretty. George Carlin would have a field day with the wording.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yeah. Flight
tweeted after the
termination
fact.
system. Yeah. And it's flying a more sophisticated version now where it's pretty much completely automated. So the computer is just looking at the variables and waiting to destruct it at the right altitude.
So there they blow it up at
Yep.
T plus 405. And again, the language they used was the automatic flight termination system has been activated.
Yep.
And then the explanation on the backside was an unexpected thermal event led to rapid unscheduled disassembly of the vehicle. And they
Yeah.
say
Rud.
mission was a total success, right? So here's the response of the SpaceX team, after the explosion. Everybody's like, like you two just took the stage. Everybody's very happy. And then there's this other view coming up of Elon at the console, and he doesn't look terribly upset. He's like, okay, yeah, that was good. That's a data point, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
I like the dude next to him, kind of the bro look.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the flight test director or who that guy is, but I like the way it's very cash there.
Yeah.
Not quite what we remember seeing from Mission Control in the heyday of NASA. Was this a success? Where does this flight fit in what Starship's mission schedule looks like, and what is Starship for?
So the first question, was this a success? Yes. You have to remember this is test flight, and obviously the first launch of any innovative vehicle is high risk. There's a whole bunch of new systems and processes that are being tested out for the first time together. So the goals here were mainly to not blow up on the pad and to get some flight data, which were the two things it did. The other goals in terms of going to space and testing out reentry and things of that nature, they were very lofty goals, but very unlikely that they would ever get there in the first place. So SpaceX and team are largely happy that the vehicle didn't do a rapid unscheduled disassembly on the pad and completely destroy the infrastructure that they spent years building. Now there was damage done at the facility from this launch that they're going to have to do some serious repairs for, but it's not insurmountable. And now they have real flight data on this vehicle. So was it a success? Yes, it was a success. Where does this vehicle fit into SpaceX and the programs at large with NASA? There's two parallel programs going on here. So with relation to NASA, they are on a $3 billion contract to develop the human landing system, which is the lunar lander for the Artemis program. It'll be used in Artemis 3, where NASA astronauts will rendezvous with the Starship lunar lander in lunar orbit and dock with it and go down to the lunar surface for a visit, and eventually longer duration stays measured in weeks and months on the surface. So Starship for now is our lunar lander. So that is why they're getting that money from NASA. So this is being very closely monitored by NASA and the Human Landing System team. So NASA, is involved with is lightly involved right now in the early development and just monitoring and just helping support where they can, because they haven't built the lander yet, but we're trying to build the machine that gets the lander to space. Parallel to this is Elon's hopes and dreams of obviously lowering the cost of access to space, colonizing Mars and other places in the solar system. So Elon has already sold 3 crewed launches on Starship 2 with Jared Isaacman for Polaris Dawn, and 1 flight for the Dear Moon mission. So we already have a crew manifest for Starship. There's already a manifest they're developing for their Starlink launches, among various other payloads for cargo. So, but in the scope of the program, we're extremely early. We're not expecting to see really a full up success, frankly, for maybe 10 or 12 missions, soup to nuts. I'm talking landing, catching, the whole 9 yards, because this is so new. We can't compare this rocket to any other rocket that's ever existed due to its scale, its complexity, and the goals they're trying to achieve. This is a fully reusable rocket. We do not have any rockets flying right now that are fully reusable. And if, Elon's famous quote is like, imagine if every time you flew an airplane and you landed, you threw it away. Cost of flying would be much more expensive.
Yes.
So he wants to reuse these vehicles rapidly and at high volumes. So that is the final goal. As we saw with Falcon 9 landing, it took them several years to really nail that. And now Falcon 9 doesn't miss. It always lands at sea, on a floating ocean platform, and on land. So we have to give it some patience, because it's like comparing, the Wright Flyer to, a Gen 4, fighter jet, right? Like they're both fly, but they are completely on different worlds.
Well, when we were talking before we started recording, you pointed out rightly that this is the nature of test, right? So the first F-16 went flying when it wasn't supposed to on the second high-speed taxi mission. The second Tomcat had a total hydraulic failure on short final to the Calverton runway, and both guys had to punch out successfully, fortunately. This is why we do test. It's hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So it seemed like as soon as the rocket blew up, that everybody was on Twitter like, oh, the day he takes away everybody's blue checks, he has this failure in his mission. Maybe he should focus on the right stuff. But that's not an accurate context as to what this mission was for. And again, I entreat the audience to watch this episode of your channel, because you go through exactly, and you posted this 10 days ago, by the way, so you're early to this party. This isn't just something that's a news cycle interest to you. This is your core theme of your channel. But in this, you talk about what was supposed to happen, right? So you talk about the big heavy was supposed to land in the Gulf, and the rocket itself, or the rest of the Starship, was supposed to land in the Pacific. And they anticipated it was going to, as you described, belly flop. It wasn't supposed to do a nice, graceful landing, but obviously that was cut short. But in terms of test and what the mission objectives were, this is an unqualified success. And in fact, you tweeted this: a rocket is just the physical manifestation of thousands of brilliant, hardworking people working towards a single goal. I love this. So I think that's the right perspective for all of us to have. This isn't like, let's hassle Elon because he has made himself a target. I think, and that's why I wanted to have you on to talk about this. So let's focus again on Artemis 2 and 3. Artemis 2 is going flying in 2024, right? And they're supposed to, it'll be
November,
the longest. It's November of 2024 is the launch.
Yeah, that's the current launch schedule.
So this is the longest space mission ever. They're going to go circle the moon in preps to, as you said, rendezvous with Starship. And then do we have a rough time when we think we would be landing this new generation of astronauts on the moon? And are the astronauts the same people who are doing Artemis 2?
Artemis 2 will be doing a flyby of the moon, akin to the Apollo 13 trajectory. They'll be doing kind of like a figure 8 free return trajectory around the moon. And that is also a test. There are 2 test pilots on board the flight, and they're going to be pushing Orion, the vehicle that carries the crew to the moon, to its limits to really see what its capabilities are, so that it is considered operational to carry crew. Artemis 3 will be a different crew of 4. And the timing of that is really up in the air, to be honest with you. At this point, it's been frustrating to look at the lunar exploration program for the last 20 years because the targets just kept changing. And when you keep changing the end goal, it's hard to develop technology because like the rocket changes and like there's just so many different variables that change. NASA wasn't able to fully efficiently invest in the program until about 10 years ago, when they locked in the Space Launch System and Orion to go to the moon. So Starship only in 2001 got the contract to be the human landing system. It was a little less than 2 years ago, and they were nowhere near at this point. Now, Starship as a program for SpaceX had been a paper rocket for about 10 years, and the engines were being developed, and some hardware was being developed, and they developed some Starship like prototypes at that period, but it was an infant. It was an amoeba. It was nothing. So the goals were aspirational for a 2025, 2026 landing. I think that is way too soon. We might be looking at 2027, maybe 2028 more realistically, because there's just a lot of testing that needs to be done. And I just know how schedules in this business continue to shift to the right. And it's not, I don't blame SpaceX. It's just they got the contract kind of late because it was just the way funding works out. This is really, really hard to do. And we're going to put human beings on this lander. Lives will be on the line here. So we need to ensure that this thing is safe and is going to be, it's going to be done in a way that NASA approves. And as we know, anything, especially with NASA, they're extremely diligent. And this is a very high risk campaign that they're going through with Artemis. So they're going to go through every test step they can to ensure that without a shadow of a doubt, or at least at a very high rate, 99% plus rate, that the crew will survive this flight. So every component is going to be tested ad nauseum, and then there's going to be dissimilar redundancy, not just redundancy, but dissimilar redundancy in a variety of phases of this lander, so that if one system fails, there's a different backup system to back up that. So the lander in of itself is going to be a huge technological development and challenge, very doable, but that's just going to take some time, parallel to building the super heavy Starship system to get it there. So there's a lot to do.
So how big is Starship compared to Saturn V, both size and also thrust wise?
It is bigger. It is taller. It is thicker. It is, in terms of thrust, the number off the top of my head, I cannot recall exactly, but if you were to put all 33 Raptors pedal to the floor on launch, it's roughly about 20% more thrust than the Saturn V. That doesn't actually give you 20% more mass to orbit. The second stage of Starship is incredibly more, has a lot more capability than the Saturn V. So the launch to orbit without doing a refuel in low Earth orbit, it can bring much more mass to the moon and to Earth. And what's fascinating with Starship is that second stage you saw, there's going to be a wide variety of variants for it. There's going to be a crew variant. There's going to be a lunar lander variant, cargo, so just sending payloads to space. There's going to be a tanker variant, which is literally just going to be a Starship that's just filled with methane and oxygen to go rendezvous with another Starship in space that is the fuel depot. So the goal is that Starship will rendezvous with the fuel depot, be totally topped off, and we'll be able to go pretty much anywhere in the solar system faster and more efficiently than ever before. So this rocket, its mass to the moon or to Mars is it's just greatly outweighs anything we've ever done before. So that's why it's like a game changer in terms of like us reducing the cost of access to space. Like there's been no shortage of desire to explore space. There's been a shortage of desire to fund space. So if we can find ways to reduce the cost of access, we're going to make it easier to explore, to learn more, and to get people and science up there to learn more about where we're from, where we're going, and develop, defense mechanisms and things of that nature to protect our planet.
Well, I think the media in general, to paint with broad strokes, has framed this generation of spaceflight as an expensive hobby of the Bezoses and Musks of the world, and all these celebs, Richard Branson and so forth and so on. And they've totally missed the fact that we are on the cusp of a next generation, a space renaissance that is going to redefine as you've just described with these various capsules, and you talk about tanking in space and all kinds of stuff. I don't think many Americans know that we are on a trajectory to put humans on the moon again. I don't think anybody, they thought that was just a talking point from President Trump or something. So I highly recommend to my viewers that you subscribe to TJ's channel.
Thank you.
Called I Need More Space, because he's on the case. TJ, thank you for spending part of your busy day with us and explaining what happened yesterday, and then more broadly, what is happening in this era of space exploration. And we look forward to having you on the channel very soon.
Thank you, Ward. This was great.
All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/Ward Carroll. In the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.